The siren still echoed far away when I saw his look change. It was not out of anger. It wasn't a surprise. It was something even worse. It was the silence Wade before making that you don't have a backup. The gun was on the table and stopped it, but this is too. And I knew in that second, that's the time I had finished. The man that I love and I was too close to the truth. And if it is that one step further, there would be no more of us. Hello, my name is Sophia. And I really didn't want to be lied to someone else how to lie to him. As I tried to control your breathing, everything inside of me was screaming to run away. But I did. I got it because you love someone like Robert. It is not that simple. It is not only one of him. It's the law of order, and the type of man who believes in truth will always find a way. And the problem with that is just that. For I am the truth, which can't be found, at least not yet. You may, as long as you listen to this. You're trying to figure out how something is so bad it started in a way that was so true. I do ask this question every day. Because in the beginning there was no world news, not the weapons, nor the menacing silence. There was a calm. There was a conversation. He had the kind of look that makes you let your guard down without realizing it. I remember the first time he spoke to me as if I were someone ordinary, someone without the past, without a goodbye. And I left them there. I left it because, for a few minutes, I wanted to believe it. From the very first meeting, I knew that I couldn't say anything. It was not an impulse. It was a choice. I will have my last name on purpose, not for the shy. But that's because I didn't really know what would happen if he went on that name is when it loads back and forth. And when you love someone, sometimes, the fear of missing out is more than courage. To be honest, the meetings began to be seen. The conversations are too long to be just a slip of the tongue. The laughter that came easily, as if the life were for the first time, offering me something. With him, I felt like I was seen, not a review. No doubt view. And this has created a dependency culture. Because when someone who you see as you start to imagine a life in which you know that you can't have it, a normal life. Safe and secure, clean. But as long as their love grew, the fear of growing up together. Each and every detail of it, and I hit it with a weight in the new one. Each response is incomplete. It turned into a venture, Robert. He started to notice. This is by no means self-evident. They were simple questions, almost casual. Things to anyone else, there would mean nothing. For me, it was an alarm. The documents do not beat. The stories that I was telling, the half of it. The silence lasted a second longer than they should have been. What's worse is that he may not be aware of jealousy. He, however, because it no longer made any sense. And when a man is how he does it, he doesn't know it. He is investigating. I tried to pull away. I swear that I've tried. However, the more I shrinking, he was coming closer. As if he felt that he was on the verge of losing something that's important to let them go. The lie is no longer a protection and turned into a prison. I don't know who I was when I was with him. I only knew that your love would begin to hurt. And then, in the past, he began to find myself the little signs. For a look that you wouldn't, with a name that almost said it out loud. The permanent sense of being recognized. Meanwhile, Robert did what he always did. He sought answers. And you don't know it all. He was already too close. Right now, just sitting there, staring at him quietly. And I realized that it was not a question just for me. To tell you the truth does not mean only to lose it. It would mean putting you in danger. Because when the truth comes out, she doesn't get to choose who it hurts. It was at this point that everything started to spiral out of control. Because in the next question, which it would not have, how do I prevent it? Before I continue, let me tell you one thing, with the same sincerity with which I am not telling you all of this. As long as I revivo every single detail. And I'm wondering how many of the people who are listening to me now you have gone through something like that. Is not exactly the same, but that's a weight on your chest to fall in love with somebody. And at the same time, you carry a secret that seems almost too big to fit on the inside of us. If you've ever felt that the conflict between telling the truth and protect those you love, write it in the comments. nor do you need to explain everything. Sometimes, one sentence says more than 1,000 words you don't want, and the other people that are watching you will also like to read it, and it creates something that is going to in this video. This story holds you captive, and if you feel that tightness in your stomach to me now leave a like. It is not just a token to the automatic. This is the way that content is still coming in. More people need to hear something like that. You need to recognize on the stories of real, flawed, human. Each of Tan pushed that message one step further. And if you feel that you want to keep with me until the very end, if you subscribe to the channel, don't like the person who clicks to click on, but as to who you decide to follow the stories that are not told the half of it. The stories start in a simple way and you are going to be revealing the layers, but they are not always comfortable. But they are true. When you sign up, you are saying that you want to be a part of it. You want to be here when it all fall apart and when it all unfold, because they will not take it. This is the point where the truth starts to push for a way out. This is where the love and duty will start to face it head on. And I want you to be with me in order to understand what happened after that. And when he finally asked the question I dreaded to hear, he inclined his head in a way that was almost inaudible, as if he was putting the pieces in my head, and I could feel the air getting heavier as it should be. The question that I was not yet out, but it was there, floating around among us, ready to fall down on top of the desk as a blow. And it was at that second in the silence, too short and too long at the same time, I found myself remembering where it all began. Because the truth is, nothing is born in a flame. Sometimes it starts with a simple gesture, a phrase spoken at the right time, and with someone else looking at it as if you do not have to defend himself all the time. I met Robert on one of those days where I just want to fly under the radar. I was tired of holding his own with both hands. She got the load, making the old, as if they were chains that are hidden underneath the clothes, and it appeared as if it might have been there for a long time, as if the place was on him, as if the world made sense to him when he came in. It was not a charm. It was silly. It was with a sense of stability. Someone who doesn't want to speak up to be heard. His voice was quiet, but that wasn't the quiet, empty. It was the calm of one who has seen the worst of people, and even then, still standing firm as a whole. And he said to me, in no hurry, it may seem small, but it's not. When you live in the fall on a second thought, can it sound like a threat? But with him, it was different. He asked me my name as the one who really wanted to get to know, as someone who was not only collecting information, but also recognizing the person. Sophia, I said. And when he did, it was as if this name gained weight again, as if I could just do this for a few minutes to the story without the rest of it, without the behind the scenes. No, the truth is hidden, that which has always accompanied me. I think of his hands. The hands of a person who is working, who is holding the responsibility without complaint. I can still remember the way he watched it all without looking suspicious, but she was. He noticed the details. Only that didn't make it to a show. That kind of attention, I removed it, because I was not used to anyone paying attention and not want to dominate. It was a way to shield it, don't suffocate. One way to take a position that makes the environment appear to be less dangerous. And so, for me, it was almost a temptation, with the idea of being close to someone like that. The irony of this is that I already knew that right there. That's the only thing that I could offer him was the very thing that he most respected. The truth, not the whole truth. I couldn't tell you bits and pieces. You could create versions that are acceptable and could sustain an image that is not threatened. But that is my last name is not. I feel that as a rule. Write it before I decide on anything at all. I knew what would happen to him if he heard that name out of my mouth. It's not because I thought that he would find it less because I was ashamed of who I am. It was the opposite. I was scared to see what this name would cause her eyes to him. The fear of the impact. The fear of the transformation is instantaneous in the sense of duty. The fear of being reduced to the form, which is a problem that must be addressed. So I did what people are afraid to do. I chose to go to the exit, which seemed to be the most secure at the moment. I've told you enough to look real. but it is not enough just to be dangerous. And when he said, "The story," "And you're from where?" I replied, as one who steps on the glass. I've talked to people everywhere in the routines of work, and they seem to have in common. I've built narration that fit you well, because I had practiced it before. With him was a new detail. I wanted it to be true. I wanted it so much that it would be the start of something, clean it for a moment. I almost believed that I could be. He smiled in a way that was polite, as if he were keeping something to himself. And he said that I looked like someone who carries most of the show. I laughed, trying to get the thing to sound light, but on the inside I Congolese. It was the first time that I felt that the risk is real, but the risk to me to report it. But that's the risk of someone seeing it. Because when someone sees it, you lose control of the story. And I've always lived by controlling the story. Anyway, I have not been back since. I came back because of him moving on with my mind, as if it were a kind of mirror in which I had to face choices that I had been putting off. I came back because of being near him. I would imagine a version of myself that I needed to get away. And then, without realizing it, I started to measure the time interval between one meeting and another. I hope that one voice, that way you lie. He looks strong. And that's where the danger is real begins, when we hold onto to what's going on. But what would happen if anything went wrong? In the beginning, it was just a conversation, the simple things. But every word of it opened up inside of me, and each of the space for more, the more you trust. More delivery, courage. And I've always had the courage to take on the world. I did not dare to say a line from one of my own first name. This is the contradiction I was. Because to me, it is not a novel of the facade. That is, a string of small decisions that, when you realize, have become a path of no return. And Robert, he wasn't stupid. He was kind, but he was not blind. It was the kind of your presence calms him down, and at the same time it calls for. It requires consistency. It requires that all the things that make no sense. And I knew that sooner or later he's going to want you I couldn't give you. It was for this reason that, even at this first encounter, the heart is beating at a rate that I didn't recognize you. I've made a pact quiet to myself that I was going to leave you with this feeling of being born. But I was going to keep the most dangerous part of me locked away. It's just that the problem of the lock of a truth it is that it doesn't get any rest. And she hits it. She will rise. It searches for the exit. And when the love starts to feel real and the truth, do not ask for the license. It calls for the ticket. Since the covenant of quiet, and I thought that I would be able to keep everything under control. I thought that it was enough to choose from as well as to the words. You smile, the time is right. Turn the right questions, and you are done. Only there's one thing that nobody can account for. When you find someone who makes you let your guard down, to his own lie, it begins to look more and more like Scream. And with Robert, and it was all noisy and fast. The meetings became routine, and I knew it. It was not always planned, it wasn't always perfect, but it was constant. At times he would show up just to ask me how I was doing, as if it were the most natural things in the world. At the time I said that I was busy, and he responded with the quiet that falls apart. It's okay. I just wanted to see you in a minute, and in a minute it turned into a conversation longer. It turned into laughter. Did that feel weird to you that, for a moment, I was in pursuit of? The one I picked up was the way he listened to me. It was not the type to listen to anyone who is waiting for the turn to speak. He really paid attention to it. And the more he listened, the more I felt like I was. The view in a way that gave it a shame and a relief at the same time. Because I was so used to being examined, measured, judged to be. With him, I was noticed. And it changes the mindset of the people. You start to wonder, what if I don't have to run away all the time? You start to imagine that making different choices than before would have seemed impossible. And it is here that the heart of him, the reason why the most natural way in the world. There was a day in which I laughed out so loud that I was surprised by my own laughter. I think it's because, after that, I stayed silent, looking at him as if he were trying to figure out who it was that story that I could laugh like that. He looked up at me from the back and said, almost as if it were a simple statement, "I like to see you like this," and the thing hit me with a bang insanity. Because I, too, liked it. He enjoyed too much. And like the others, has always been dangerous. Robert had a presence that made all things seem possible. He spoke of things in common, work, routine, and the small end of the day. And even then, I felt that there was a safe in there. It is not promised in the world. It was only in a way that was firm, as if his life would be less complicated in its vicinity. And I went, and I spent some time to take it, because the truth is, I was tired of the load of the weight on her own. But each time I got closer and closer, the fear came with it. It was like love, bearing him to the shadow for the hand. As more and more real he grew, the more dangerous it became. I found myself experimenting with the answers in his head, thinking of the questions that he had not yet done so. I started to pay attention to the details. That once I was, the way it watched him for a name on a piece of paper. As it took me a second, but when I talked to in the past, as he sort of understood it when I go out of the subject matter. And it wasn't paranoia. It was an instinct. It was my body's telling you that I was walking on a land that is not forgiving of error. Because from that moment on, I started to imagine a life that's normal. I don't think the frame-up. Normal life of the demands of truth. It requires consistency. It requires a story that doesn't have holes in them. And that's my story. It had holes too, and they were no holes and the innocent. They were the holes that were behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, which I have never let anyone see it. And I knew that if Robert saw it, it would not be just to talk hard. It would be an immediate transformation in the way that he looked at. And maybe it's not for a lack of feeling. Maybe it was precisely because there is a feeling. I found myself doing things I have never done before. I care about a lot of things. I wanted to know if he had eaten, he had gone to bed, and if I was okay after a day of heavy work. I found myself waiting for your messages, smiling at herself, feeling jealous of the ideas that will leave her, as though I had a right to feel like that. And by the vineyard of the blame as well. A guilt then, a constant. You didn't need to shout it to United Kingdom. As I was designing a place inside of me and him, and at the same time, by hiding the most important part of my name. The most evil of it is that, at times, I almost had. Have you had those nights when I opened my mouth, and I stopped? Have you had moments where it was quiet for a while, looking at me, as if she were giving me a space to talk about something that I couldn't do that? And to me, people, human, or chose the easy way out. I'd give you a piece of the truth that would not resolve anything. I will go out with a smile, with a statement light and a history minor, and he accepted it. But don't swallow it all. I could see it in their eyes, for a look that is not to accuse, but to register. And that's when the relationship started to get that taste of sweet and sour, you know? Because it was too good to be lying. And that was a lie, too much to be a good one. At each meeting, I left with a full chest, and his head heavy. I had a thought that you caught up with me. I'm building something on top to keep a secret, and Jesus, sooner or later. They charge you the price. It does not matter how much we try to negotiate. Robert has started to become more and more present. In a non-intrusive way, with the utmost care. He asked me with interest. I wanted to know more about me, where I was on my own making. And then, when he was asked, he didn't seem curious empty. It seemed like a necessity, as it was with the feeling that there was something that I didn't tell you. And the more he came to this point, the most I have shared between two desires, the desire to be whole, and the desire to protect that which I have not yet had the courage to reveal it. He had a morning where I woke up with a racing heart, as if I had heard my last name being called. I sat up in bed, breathing slowly, trying to regain control. And it was at this time that I began to understand it in a very simple and creepy. I was no longer in control. I was able to track the sentence, controlling the meetings, keep track of the distance. But I don't control how much I had been involved in. And that's a game changer. Why, when the feelings turn real, the true, hidden to begin to be strong, to hide it. And I didn't understand the question, that I was no longer if it would be suspicious. and it turned into when. When he would look at me that way for a serious, strong, and asking for an answer that I would not be able to get around with a smile. He was patient, but he was not stupid. And I was, little by little, giving him all of the tracks that I swore I would never let fall. I have started to notice the change, and before I could admit it to myself, it was not a match. There was a prosecution in the mail. It was much more subtle and, for that reason, the most dangerous. Small cracks appearing where before. It all seemed sound. The way that Robert was silent for a second longer than the right answer. The eye that does not go out when I go out. To calm him, he began to gain weight differently, as if it had been used to see, it is not only for at home. The questions that popped up out of nowhere, most of the time in a quiet moment. You said that you'd been working there for a long time. Was it before or after the move? That kind of thing. Simple sentences, which are common, than in any other conversation would lead to nothing. But it is in me to produce an immediate impact. Because I didn't really know where the story had been sewn, where each and every detail had been chosen to appear consistent. And when he asked these questions, it's not like that trying to get someone's a contradiction in terms. It was like the one who tests the design to something that doesn't seem secure enough. There was a day in which he held the role for too long. Don't say anything. It was there, reading, rereading, just as if you were to reorganize the information on the inside. I felt my body respond. It was not fear of striking, and it was the alert, built in with the people, learned to recognize through a lot of bad decisions. I noticed that he was starting to see a behind the scenes. Not all of it. No, not yet. But it's enough to know that there is a truth hidden, trying to remain unseen. The most disturbing was that there was no anger in the way of it. There was no recovery for emotional, not distrust, full of jealousy. It was something else. It was such a method. It was logical. It was the mindset of people who need things to make sense to move forward. And that scared me more than any burst of feeling. Because I knew how to deal with emotions. I have always known. What I didn't know, he was dealing with someone who is suspected in the silence, as they join the parts without announcing that you're piecing together a jigsaw puzzle. In a few moments, I found myself talking to the others, trying to fill in the spaces that he had not been asked to fill it out. On the other, I was silent and bet that the silence would go unnoticed. Neither of the two strategies will work for a long time, because it was excessive and he's gone. And little by little, I understood that the problem wasn't a lie, in a specific way. It was on the set. It was the cumulative impact of small inconsistencies which, on their own, they don't say anything, but together, they begin to tell a different story from the one that I have been trying to raise money. He had a night when he asked me for something so simple that I would cave in completely. He wanted to know where I had gone for a certain period of time in my life. I told him. The response was tested. It always has been. It's just that, this time, he didn't say anything after that. You only nodded, as one who registers to use for later. And in that moment, I was sure of one thing, and that he was not looking for a confession. He was looking for confirmation. When someone gets to that point, on the journey in that direction, I've got the measure of each of the words with more care than ever before. With each sentence, he turned to a decision. With each encounter, I started to have a strategic weight that I didn't want to be able to do. That lightness that I had seen the first began to be replaced by a constant attention is almost complete. I felt like I was walking on a ground that could give out at any moment. And what's worse is that it was not doing anything to push me. He just expected it. And wait for it, when you have something to hide, this is a silent way to the pressure. It was then that it sunk in from time to time. He was not concerned because they felt threatened and emotionally. He was not afraid of losing me to someone else. The suspicion of it came from a place much deeper than that. Came to the realization that something in my history is not maintained by myself. That there were a lot of decisions out there who have not been explained. There was a transformation from poorly resolved with a ticket in white, which does not fit in with the rest of what I have depicted it to be. It's changed everything for me. Because up until then, I still believed that, if it were necessary, I could get around this with a little more careful. The longer it is, the more delicate care. But then, when I realized that it was concerned that, for consistency, it is not for the sentiment. I don't think that the risk is real, concrete. No, it was more of a fear of the abstract in the future. It was something that was going on at the present time, even without the words explicit. I got to see Robert in a different way as well. I came to see how he is after a few days of suits, how to ask questions the seemingly loose. That at the bottom, they rotate around the same point. I've come to understand what he was trying to protect something, perhaps to himself, perhaps his own sense of justice, which was carrying. And in it, I found myself in a position to be impossible. The more they were looking for clarity, I want to hide. And the more I hide, the more clearly was that there was something wrong. There were times when I was thinking about stopping it all. To create a distance before it, the impact would be greater. But it was enough for him to look at me like that. Quiet, firm, and for that I remember that I had gone too far. I was caught between two opposing forces. The desire to be honest, the real fear of the consequences of such a door. Because I knew that if the truth were to come to the fore in the wrong way, there would be only one conversation is a difficult one. It would be a smash. For a change, it is irreversible in the way that he would see me. Perhaps in the way that you would see, too. From then on, every encounter has passed. The charging voltage is not needed to be said. I was up in the air if you snuck in the silences, the pauses between one sentence and another. And I felt like I was just putting off something that is unavoidable. Because when one begins to suspect is not what you feel, and what you are, what time it is no longer an ally. And then, without even realizing it, I had been in that stage in which it does not need to be discovered. They just need to be made. When the truth is something that needs to be verified, you can start to live like you were always 2 steps behind. And I say this with no exaggeration. I woke up already tired, as if he had spent the whole night running around. Because in every single conversation with Robert was no longer just a conversation, and it turned into a minefield. It was not he that made that a hearing. It was my own fault that it was a sentence appear to be a final choice. The worst part is that I didn't. He was on to great things all the time. I am in a lot of things. And that's the way the prison is built up. The brick by brick. A detail is omitted here. The name is changed there as a O. I don't remember exactly when I remember it perfectly. I could see myself setting the story in the speed of thought, as I was editing my life to live, so she will fit in to look at it. And the more I edited, the more I became lost within the script. At times, I would say one thing one week and another one, and I want to remember what version I had been using. It sounds simple, but it is created just for you. As you begin to measure it, the tone of the response time, which you may or may not say. And when you live as well, you will not be accepted. Have you seen a strategy? Turn a set of decisions that are computed. And I used to hate it because I never wanted to be based on it. I wanted it to be real. It is the real had a behind the scenes too. I would find myself looking in the mirror. You have to find the one for Robert and me, wondering who I was going to go out that night. In the story that laugh? In the story that it tells a short time? In the story that seems transparent enough so as not to raise any suspicions? At some point, I realized that I didn't know where I ended and where you began the versions that I have created. And it feels terrible, empty, like you were disappearing into while trying to hold something beautiful from the outside. And at the same time, I was in love with him. This is the part that gives it more of a shame to admit this, because it seems contradictory to the other. But love does not ask for consistency. It happens. And when that happened, when I was close to him, and I forgot to say this for a few minutes, I was carrying the truth to hide it. I forgot to say this, because it made the world seem less threatening. However, soon after, had the impact I was reminded of the risk. I remember that a safe place, which he felt was not a place that I had the right to take lying to you. It began in the United Kingdom. It hurt for real. It was not a drama. it wasn't an exaggeration. It was a pain in the silent, steady, which hold more precisely, in good times and bad times. Why, I thought to myself, it is that clear, and I'm not handing out clean. I was indulging in with the shadows. So I made a decision that seemed to mature in my mind. I was going to get away. Not in a way that was dramatic, not an argument. I have found that if I remove them slowly, and I could have avoided the accident, I could preserve the image of him out of me. I couldn't stop him to get hurt with the revelation that I have not yet had the courage to put into it. I've thought about it all the time, in the distance. You may chose the one that I just couldn't settle with the words. The only one that was there for the life of me. I showed you how wrong I was. When I first started to back away, Robert came along. It has been almost immediate. He went on to appear in more, ask more, and be more present, as if he had felt the shift in the air. As if he understood what I was trying to escape to for some reason. And that made me even more of their prey because of the remoteness of that. I had planned turned into the exact opposite. Shiwa's approximation is inevitable. It did not come with a charge. He came in with care. You're different, he said, without pointing the blame, just watching. And I know how to sustain what we were doing. It wouldn't anything invented and created by fatigue, invented and created the routine, invented and created life, most small lies. And every lie is small. It was more of a grid in prison. There was a time when he took my hand in his, and it was there in silence, as if he was giving me time to tell you something that I couldn't do that. I felt his chest burning with the desire to tell it. I swear to you that I have felt. It's just that, when I have opened your mouth, your mind ran in front of you, and he would show me the consequences, just as if they were images, fast, what to look for him, changing the posture of his stiff, and the making of it becoming something else. I had no fear of being judged. I was afraid of the domino effect. The fear of the truth that it does not fall only on me, fall on all around us. This is the most dangerous when you begin to justify the lie as if it's protecting. When you start to believe that you are doing it for the sake of the other. It is a mental trap is very easy, as it gives you a sense of control. It gives you the feeling that you are avoiding a disaster. It's just that, in the end, you're just delaying and increasing the damage. Because the more time that passes, the more the feelings are there to be hurt, the most up to expectations. Most plans with low noise levels. The story is built on top of a database in an unstable state. Robert talked about the future in a way that was random. It was not a request. It was not the promise official. It was a one day is here, and a maybe in there. I could see myself smiling and responding too, by entering it as a joke. And I thought to myself, you have no idea what you are holding, and yet I could not get it to release. I started to get scared of silly things. Someone saying a name next to it. The connection unexpectedly. A random encounter with someone from my past. Everything would be broken. Everything could change. Revelation. And to live in waiting for the breach to happen, it's like to live with the door unlocked. In a place where you know that someone's going to get. At a certain point, I realized that it's a lie. There was only a white lie. It was a way of life. And so I freaked out, because I didn't want to get into it. I didn't mean to love, to win a game of survival. I wanted to breathe in close to him can be calculated. It's just that, at this point, I had built up a small inconsistencies with the other. And he is getting closer and closer. It appeared to be putting it all together. With the patience of one who does not give up until you understand what is out of place. And then, when he finally said, voice low and steady, the story. Tell me one thing. I knew that it wasn't a question either. When he said that the story, tell me one thing. I felt as if the air had become thinner. It was not a threat. It was not the tone of a hard one. It was the firmness of the quiet, which gives you more scared than any of the call. Because you can understand what the other person has made a decision on the inside. It is by choosing the time of confirmation. I tried to smile, tried to put the airiness in his voice, but my throat refused to go. I told him, he says, such as who sets foot on the lowest step, without knowing if it's going to break. He said nothing at the time. He looked at me as if to measure the weight of the vines. It's just that before he opens his mouth in the past, decided to mix it up, on the way to a more ruthless as possible. It began with signs of a small, almost ridiculous for such a simple one, a notification on the phone that I blacked out too fast. An envelope arrived with a party in my name hidden, but it wasn't enough. A face in the market by looking at me for too long. I've been calling all of this a coincidence, of paranoia, of being tired. I tried to convince myself that I was still in control, only that the control of the truth, not to tremble from the inside out. In the first shock of the real it happened late one afternoon, when the joint? I was with Robert, and we had stopped at a place he knew well. I remember it because I had been able to relax for a few minutes. I was thinking that maybe I was overreacting, and that, perhaps my own mentality, was creating monsters where it does not exist. Then I heard a voice from behind me, a voice that was not his, saying something like, "Are you?" It was too short. "It's not finished." But that was all it took for the blood to go down through the ice. I turned around slowly, trying to keep a normal expression, and I saw someone who I hadn't seen for too long. One of those appearances that you don't need to come crying to mess everything up. Look for that a person has gone through me, as if he were acknowledging the memory. She opened her mouth again, and I saw the name is almost to be born at the tip of your tongue. In my last name, the one in which I had concealed with such discipline that, at times, I almost believed that he wasn't there. I've cut off, not with words, but with an attitude, for a look that you crave, and threatening at the same time. I made some excuse to the quick of anything, and that I, Robert Close, as if it were natural, as if I just was in a hurry. And he realized, no name, not the whole truth, but it was noticed the change in me. My body is talking to you before I will be able to come up with a story. After that, I started to feel like I was being followed by a shadow. He was not someone is physically standing behind me the whole time. It was on the feel of it in my past. I had woken up and decided to go back to the charge. I was going through posts and found that I was going to hear it again. That voice. I met the links with your heart beating in the wrong. I opened up the messages with the hand to help. And what's worse, I've started to see Robert's looking at. He became quiet for a while. More to watch out for. As if that's a little scene that I had made something inside of him. He said at the time, but I've seen it when he had held out the detail. And it is this that gives to think of people as they don't forget about the details. They have to connect again. And even if I pretend that nothing had happened to me, and I know that she had left a mark. The research begun in a way that was so discreet, that is, for a long time, and I almost didn't notice. But I know what it's kind of minded. Robert is not impulsive, he is a patient. And of patience when it turns to curiosity and becomes a quest. I've noticed a lot of little things as well. He has to check something on the phone after a number of conversations by asking a question that seemed to be random looking. Documents with care that he didn't have one. It was not an invasion. It was such a method. He was trying to figure out what was out of place, and I was in the right place. The most frightening aspect is that I get the feeling that I was watching my life from the outside would be able to see it, but I don't want to see it. As if the fact were so close that any one of us could play, except for me. Why do I still clung to the last? However, is that I will have time to choose the right moment. It's just the life that does not respect for the right time to no one. It just happens. And I began to realize the fact that, in quarrels, in a comment released to someone else known to him, with a last name that is mentioned in a conversation that you don't have anything to do with me, a file that is opened to quickly and closed it to fast. A small revelation does not say anything, but pointed in the same direction as the arrow keys will not be seen. I wanted to talk about for real. I say it 1,000 times over. It's just that all the time I thought the words coming out, and I could see an impact on the face of it. I could see the transformation of a sense of duty. I have come to see the making of it by changing our story for free so that I could stop them. And that was when I shrinking one more day, one more night, one more meeting. Until, that is, in the morning, he sent me a simple message. 2. We need to talk to take your time. And it was only then that I realized that the conversation in which I'd put it off, until it was no longer my choice. If you have ever lived through anything like that, that is the fear of the truth hidden. To come to the fore in the last time, you write in the comments, only in the phrase, I know what it's like this, when he said that we needed to talk to the quiet. I spent the whole day in silence, from the inside out. Not that silence is quiet, but the silence in a noisy and who you're fighting with your own self-awareness. I began to ask me of things that I have been avoiding you. There is a lot of time. If your love is truly justified with lies, if you protect someone, this is the same as that fool you. If there is a point of the fact that it ceases to be freedom and becomes a direct threat, I think about him all the time. On the way to affirm in the way he goes about it the hard decisions without being able to hide. And then I asked myself, where do I fit in all of this? Why fall in love with somebody like Robert is not only a feeling. It's take on the impact of their own choices. And it's my choice, up to that point, I had been able to hide. Hide it not from malice, but out of fear. In fear of what will happen later in the revelation. The fear of the immediate transformation of the look of it. Afraid to see anything that we have built to turn the other thing that changed beyond recognition. It's just that, as the days wore on, the idea has begun to haunt me more than the possibility of losing it. The idea is to put you at risk and not know it. Because of the fact that I was carrying wasn't just me. It had its consequences. It had scenes that I belonged to the most. I had decisions to the old, which is still re-echoed. And if I told you everything, there would just be a conversation, a difficult between two people who love each other. It would be a shock to the world, the one that have a direct impact on his own life, in his, her work, as it is seen, and the way he sees himself. It was then that the conflict was real, for real. No, it was more about maintaining a relationship. He was in charge. Up to that point, you can choose from other, thinking that it is protecting. I felt like I was at the crossroads of the strange. On the one hand, the honesty of the total. On the other hand, in the silence, which seemed to be secured only on the surface. Any decision to have a price tag. And I began to realize that there is no neutral decision when you are in love with someone. Have you had those nights when we called? Almost said it all at once, and without a filter, without any preparation. I've rehearsing sentences in his head. He was thinking of the tone, and I pictured his face for him to respond. In some versions, it was very quiet. On the other, he stood up. No, he is still the same. And maybe that was the point, was paralyzed to make sure that, after the fact, nothing would be as it was before. Not for him, not for me. What I did not expect was the size of the risk. The more I thought about it, the more I came to understand that it wasn't just that I was exposed to. If in the past, decided to present in the wrong way, there would only be you my story of being turned. He would have been at the center of it, no, you have chosen to be with. And this is an idea I took away. Because to love someone is also trying to save you a lot of pain and he doesn't deserve to carry. Even at the cost of their own peace, I began to question in my own mind. If I was being a coward, or caution, and if the silence was a selfish or taken care of, if the truth had to come out to you at that time, or if there was a way that's less destructive than to deal with all of it. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to understand that there was no right answer. There were only a decision, and the burden of living with them. From the look of him, it was no longer the same. It was not distrust in the open, but he was paying close attention. He felt that there was something there, and I felt that the time was coming to a close, as the window for you to choose from had become too small. The fear to be left alone, emotional, and turned into practical. The fear of a revelation, out of control. The fear of someone to talk to before I did. The fear of turning love into a problem that it would solve his head, when all I wanted was for him to repair the heart. And maybe that's what I said. You realize that, at some point. Love requires giving up their own version of a comfortable story. It requires you to face the consequences. It requires to stop hiding behind the idea of protection and assume that it is the truth. And sooner or later, it always charges the ticket. If you feel that this is the kind of story grips you, and if you like to keep track of stories where nothing is ever simple, and that each decision is a game changer, it's worth to stay here with me. Because it was then that the conversation was not the light. And to follow up the order completely changes the way we understand the love, the truth, and choose. And if you're on here right now, listening to it carefully, it is because this type of story, it touches something in there as well. So if you subscribe to the channel to continue watching, know as those of you who only watch, but as one who walks beside you. Because this story is not made the easy answers, and the one that comes after it requires your presence, requires you to look at it until the very end. Stick around for that is to choose not to give up in the face when the truth begins to show through. When he finally spoke to me, I realized at the time that something else had happened to him since that conversation. It was not the tone of his voice was calm. It's hard to muddle through. It was the way he looked me up and down. It was not the look of one who has a question to figure out. It was the look of one who has understood something, just don't know it yet. The size of it. He started by saying their names, non-cited facts. You haven't played anything on the table. It began with a sentence or a loose, almost detached, as one's forehead to the ground before taking the next step. He commented on a recording, as well as on the information that appeared to be out of place on someone else mentioned something just in case. As soon as he said it, I felt like your body to react before your mind, to break an emotional come here. Not that I would know exactly what he had found out, but that's because I don't think it's my truth hidden. She was no longer alone with myself. What's worse is that he doesn't know anything. No, not yet. And it would make this situation even more miserable. Because of the part which he had in his hands, it was broken into fragments, out of context, out of order. A little piece of history to loose more and more dangerous than the story as a whole. I saw it in the way that he was watching me as I spoke, as if he were trying to reconcile the two versions of me. Inside of you, he knew. And it was beginning to appear between the lines. When he stopped talking, there was a silence, almost too much to pass up. I tried to say something, but the words did not find a way. He got up to look out slowly, and it was only then that I felt the impact of the truth. From the look of it has changed. It was not true. It was not out of anger. It was a conflict. A conflict is a deep, difficult to hide. As the two forces were competing for the same spot inside of him, he asked me a question directly, but it is incomplete. To a question which only made sense if he was already turning points of their own. I told him a little. Is not a strategy this time around, but that's because I was in shock. Because in that moment, I realized that I no longer seemed to matter how much I tried to control the narrative. The story was already written out for me. The most difficult thing was to realize that it wasn't just you. If it was just personal pain, perhaps it would be more simple. What I saw there was a split. The duty of coming into conflict with the sentiment. The mindset of it is trained to seek coherence, order, and responsibility for fighting for something that doesn't fit in the reports or protocols. He didn't know if it was looking at me as someone you love or someone that is no problem bigger than the both of us. And that's a game changer. From that moment on, for the love no longer exists in the protected area. He became the face of the law, the rules, and the consequences, but as stated, but in the present. For each word, there was loads of care and cost containment. He was measuring what it was saying, just as I had been doing it a long time ago. But now the roles have been reversed. I was exposed to. He was in a position to decide on where would it go. I felt a strange mixture of relief and panic attacks. Relief because it is a part of the weight was gone from my back, even though in the worst way possible. And you panic because he is the revelation of partial and could lead to erroneous conclusions. You could also paint a version of myself that I was. As a whole, it did not explain these choices. It did not show behind the scenes. in a release that it would hard decisions final when he pulled away a little, not by rejecting it immediately. It was out of necessity. I recognized it because I had already done the same thing before. He needed to think about. Want to reorganize your inner world, which he had just suffered an impact. And I was right there, standing on the understanding that the time for waiting was no longer in my hands. On that day, I went back to the house with the sense that nothing was left intact. The relationship of the image he had of me and the idea of a future that we've never said it out loud. Everything had gone to sleep, even without a charge, and I felt the weight of the law to hover over something that, until then, it was just a feeling. I spent the whole night awake, turning back to each and every conversation, every decision that brought me here, trying to figure out which of the pieces he had found it, what are the connections I'd made, and which are still missing. Because of the discovery of a partial is as it follows. It does not close the doors. They let in all intria birtis. And it's even more gut-wrenching. I didn't heard it was understood that, at this point, any movement of mine would be interpreted as confirmation or to escape any of silence and guilt, any word on the handle. I was in the zone where everything takes on meaning too much. Where is the love? You need to play slot with the rules. They don't take feelings into account. And while I am trying to organize my own thoughts of a certainty, he began to build a slow and annoying. He's not going to stop you right there. What he had found was not good enough to go on, but it was more than enough to keep trying. After that, the conversation is incomplete. I had to stop running away from the inside out. Not because of the fear was gone, but that's because he's had a change of form, turned into something solid, heavy, and impossible to push it under the rug. It was in this state, severe, steadfast, no tears, that I've accepted your fate the way he'd come, no role-playing, without asking for absolution, just assuming it is. I am the person I have always tried not to be to show as a whole. And my last name is not a detail of a social, not an object of residence. It is one of the keys. It opens the door I never wanted to go through and close the other, that I know that is never going to come out with it. It's not about power or status, or with any of the glamour that anyone can ever imagine. It has to do with the result, with the decisions you made before me. They are still producing impact right now. With that behind the scenes that you don't ask for permission to be there. I don't have shame. I've hidden my name conjures up questions that don't fit into casual conversation, calls records, connections, and eyes that move from place to place, calls on us to act before it's a feeling, calls two choices that are not just my own. When one recognizes this name, don't just see a person. They see a whole story at once, which requires the position. And I knew it from the very first day that you place it in front of Robert. It would be forced to decide before you feel it. What no one realizes, and maybe you're realizing now, is that you hide from me no protection, only a postponement. You have created a journey of quiet in which each step was measured, and each sentence was computed for each of the meeting was for a cost. It is invisible. I have an edited version of myself to fit in the space I want to occupy. And it exacts a high price. Because the truth is hidden, it does not stay. She will press it. It requires the air. It pushes on the inside until you find a way out. When I tell you that my last game changer, it is not an exaggeration. It redefines the customs. Change your decisions. It produces an immediate impact on the listener. I've seen it happen before, far away from Robert. I've seen people going back, hardened to take positions that they never had before. Not from malice, but by the responsibility. And this is exactly what I feared. That is what it felt like to be held to account for a bond that is not selected. So yes, I am. I am who I am. And the story I have told here has always been known to be incomplete. Not the false is incomplete. And this is all the more dangerous because it's a half-truth and create the performances. Create versions that multiply on their own. I knew it. Even so, I kept going. Because I love you, it's urgent that you get it right. Except that it doesn't become cold. I made it clear. I've stopped trying to control the narrative, and I started to see the impact of things as they really are. Love it when you find the truth as a whole. It does not react with the phrases and beautiful. He responds with silence, with a pause, with a reevaluation. And the silence is in the run-up to the collapse and transformation. I thought of Robert as he said my full name in a loud voice for it yet, but it's up to me. I thought about the impact it would have on the way in which he arranges the world. I thought the conflict is inevitable between the man that he is and the feeling that you have built. I thought about the weight of pushing someone into a decision that may cost a little more than a relationship. And even then, I knew that there was no longer room for the next versions. Because when the truth is needed, it does not ask for your permission. It takes up the whole place, and the one that comes after it with less reliance on explanations and more of how you choose to support what he discovers. I've accepted that nothing is what it was today if it goes off, but also nothing stays the same after that. It was at this point that the silence settled once and for all. No, the silence is comfortable, but the one that comes before movement is irreversible. I've always felt that the pieces were all out on the table, even though not all of them have been shown. And then, as I ran, inside which meant that they would be unable to conceal, sure, come into its own. When a man decides to look for at the end, the truth will not come as an answer, comes in as a test. When he began to learn just about everything all the time, slowed down in a way that was created just for you. There has been no advertisement. There was no dramatic scene. There has been a shift in the air, a change of attitude. The way he walked into the living room, he placed the keys on the table, as you breathed in before speaking. It was the kind of quiet that does not ask for an explanation because it already loads it, making the inside of it. I noticed that he was different because he no longer looking at me, looking for answers. Went to look at myself as the one who measured the consequences. And it hurts in a way, because you understand that the feeling is still there, but it now shares the space with something else. It does not come as a release. It came as a weight, as the impact of it, like a line drawn in between what might have been and what now needs to be addressed. He did not ask anything further, not because I had any questions, but that's because I already had enough information so that a new password be dangerous. He knew it wasn't, but he was determined. It was enough to change the mindset of it, to move on to the center of the choices. It was enough to put him on a route that he had planned to go when I met you. I watched as the conflict take place without a sound. The man, who is it that is shaped by the rules of, the responsibility and the duty to face the feelings that grew up far from the protocols? It was clearly visible. The battle of silence between the two versions of himself. And in that moment, I understood that it's something that it took too much to make it clear. You love someone and do not give you the right to require the person to break it to who she is. I wanted to tell you so many things. I wanted to explain every detail and open to everyone behind the scenes, to arrange for the disclosures in a way that was hard. But since there was no point, the truth is, when it gets late, it does not accept release. She poses as a whole, even when it comes to the parts. And I knew that any attempt to smooth it would be interpreted as a control and manipulation, as a diversion. It was then that I felt the pain move from place to place. It was not the fear of missing out. It was the consciousness that you hold on to it can also hurt you. I looked up at him and saw someone who wasn't a choice from love me or you don't. It was, by choosing to remain faithful to his own story, or if you allow a deviation from it, is irreversible. And that choice is not up to the one who loves you. It is up to the person who lives with the consequences later. The journey, internal, it got to the point of awkward, to be calm. Not because it was all fixed, but because the fight was over. I've stopped trying to influence the outcome in the end. I was back to compete for space with the truth. I have accepted that some of the stories and does not fail because of a lack of love, but to true. And that's hard to swallow, because people grow when they heard that love conquers all. Without a win at the time, it just shows. I don't think that loving someone also means releasing before the introduction of turn. Sacrifice. It means acknowledging that the impact of my truth and the life, it was not something I could ever ask for him to carry on in silence. I don't want to be the reason of a breach by the internal decisions of the takeaway for yourself. And then, without even saying it out loud, I knew he felt the same conflict from the other side of it. When he spoke, was just a few words. No definite results. No promises, no charges. It was a kind of speech, which leaves it to sleep. They don't close the doors, but you also don't invite her to come in. And it is this ambiguity that is the most painful of an end, of course, because it keeps the heart imprisoned for the possibility that as a reason to ask recession. I didn't cry. Not at the moment. The cries it demands the closure, and there's no closure there. There was a long pause. Too, is a space in which anything could be interpreted as pressure. I respected that as well. Not by force, but by understanding. Because when a person is in the face of a decision that can change the structure, your silence is the only way not to get in the way. What was between us? It was not a goodbye. It was a distance of consciousness, with a range that is loaded for all that was not said to you and everything that is understood without words. And then, as I walked out of there with a heavy body and a mind unusually clear, I knew for sure that this story was coming to an end. She was now moving into a period in which neither choice is a simple one, and none of it would be pulled off. Because when we love is faced with the truth with no protection, there is no happily ever after right away. There is the waiting. There is a consequence. There is a possibility of a decision that has not yet been revealed, and when it does, it will change everything. After that distance, aware, and I've spent the whole night awake. It is not for anxiety, but that strange feeling of something that had already been decided before you even have to be said. I looked up at the ceiling, trying to rearrange everything he had experienced up to that point. Every choice, every silence, every version of myself that I had to sustain you to get to this point. No, it was regret. He was clear-sighted. The painful clarity for those of you who understand that some of the changes just don't ask for permission. They just happen. I knew that the next day, nothing would remain the same. Not because someone else would be doing a speech, or of why there should be a scene. And definitive, but because of some decisions that will change in the air, even before they were announced. I could feel it in your body. In a way, as it took a breath to wake you up. On the way, as the time seemed to be moving more quickly than I would have liked. When the truth is no longer a possibility, and becomes as a consequence, the whole world rearranges itself around her. Robert, no, he sent me a long message. He did not explain anything. In this silence, it wasn't neglect. It was learned. I recognized it because I've been in this place before. A place where the mind worked more than heart. I would like to. It was getting to the point that it is not only a feeling, but of identity, duty, and responsibility. And when one has to choose, there is always a cost to him of someone close. I also had to make some choices in that range. Don't appoint the external, but internal. I have chosen to stop me in silence. I have chosen not to test grounds. I have chosen to accept that, no matter which path it would take. I would have had to sustain the impact of my truth without trying to soften the effect. This is the most difficult part of my journey, to understand what the emotional maturity does not always protect against the pain, but to prevent it from being rendered useless. As the day wore on, I realized that there was something even bigger at play. It wasn't just me. He was the one that each and every one of us would make it. After the selection is made, some of the revelations don't close relationships, but they redefine who we are when it's all over. And what would be the decision for him? And someone else would get hurt. Maybe it's me. Maybe he was. Maybe the two of us in very different ways. Love it when you find the truth without a filter, and rarely leaves it all to keep it. I've thought of everything you would miss it, but I was also thinking about what I would be if you were to stop me, hide away. Think about the mentality that I had been carrying, always trying to anticipate the consequences, and will always try to control the damage. And I realized for the first time, I had no way to predict anything. In the immediate future was in my hands. And to come to terms with it was, at the same time, it's scary and liberating. If you've come this far, it's because of this history. he stayed with you in some way. Not just because of what happened between me and you, Robert, but by the decisions and through the silence, and all the things that we avoid to face when the truth begins to shake. The stories thus serve not only to entertain, but they help you to think in a review of concepts, to understand the choices that seem simple on the outside but hold a huge impact on the inside. So, if you subscribe to the channel to continue with this kind of content, because that's all I would like to share here. This is just a space for reflection. There are people out there. If you feel like it, leave a comment telling us this story you were thinking of or what part you received until the very end. At times, you put it into words to help you organize things get messy inside of us. And this is a conversation you have created a connection to you. Leave a like as well. It's a way to quiet to say, I get it, it just made sense to me. And then, if you wish to keep in this climate, there's a video right here on the side, which complements this subject. Click and keeps me there as well.